Good afternoon. I am Tony Russo, the host of Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, as well as the editor of Funeral Service Insider, the weekly newsletter from Kates-Boylston. And thank you so much for joining us for this Cremation Innovations virtual event. We have two speakers today. The first, who you can see, is Kevin McKay, and he'll be speaking for about an hour. If you have any questions during the course of his presentation, just type them into the question box, which you can see it's on the right side of my screen. But you'll have a box on your screen. Just go to where it says questions and type your question out, and I will ask them as they go along. At the end of the event, you'll have an opportunity to take down Kevin's information if you want to contact him. And of course, if you miss anything, we will be sending out the video version of this tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to share it with people if you think it's useful to them, or you'll be able to rewatch it if there's stuff that you wanted to see. So I'm going to make Kevin the presenter now and set him loose, and I will be back with you. I'll be a disembodied voice until the presentation is over, and then I will be back.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. This is actually what we love to do, I would say. Is the opportunity to actually speak and present, and of course answer questions. We know that recycling is still somewhat of a mystery to a lot of people out there, so we feel as if educating people is the best way to sort of get past that, and people can then ask educated questions, and they feel a lot more comfortable about the whole process. So today what I want to do is actually just sort of talk about not only why and how does recycling play a role in cremation, but exactly what's involved, not only just the process, but also the metals and where you might find those in the crematory. So first thing, a little bit about us. We are located in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is right near O'Hare Airport. It's about 25 minutes from Chicago. So basically we always say we're from Chicago. What do we do? We're a smelting and assaying facility. I'll get into what both of those things are. Family owned and operated, have been since 1982. And we are essentially, at the end of the day, we are a direct supplier of metal to global metal fabricators. So these will be companies that make new things, and this is how all of these metals that you as crematory operators will encounter become new things. Is we are sort of the person between you guys, or the people who were using these metals, and the fabricators who make new things. So let's see. So the key points to talk about today is, as I said, talking about the actual types of metals that you're going to encounter, from precious metals, which is our core business as a precious metal recycler, to the non-precious metals, which you're going to typically see in any of the prosthetic implants. Proper collection, which is just the best way to actually go about saving all of these metals. And then talk a bit about what you should be looking for from the recycler that you're using, questions that you should be asking, things like that. So first things, the types of metal. What is dental gold? So now every time, I shouldn't say every time, a lot of the times when I'm talking about what we do and what we primarily are looking for, this is the image, or something like this is what people are thinking of when I say it's mostly dental gold that has all of the value there. That's not exactly dental gold. This is much more common. In fact, the first picture there isn't something that we really encounter much at all, if ever. This is really what we're talking about. So gold, the reason why it's used is, the picture before there, I think his name is Bad Bunny, but he's using it for a vanity purpose, if you can call it that. Whereas in the sort of mainstream dental world, it's not used for vanity, but it's used because it's never going to tarnish. It's never going to break. Almost no one is allergic to it. It's very malleable, and it's highly resistant to cavities, decay, and plaque. And it really, because it's a soft metal, it easily mimics, or at best, for something so strong and durable, a natural tooth structure. So it's a fantastic material, and that's why it's been used forever. The other type, so there's really two that go in, would be what we refer to as PFM, or porcelain fused to metal. So they still take that substructure of that metal crown and they fuse porcelain on top of it. And the reason why they do that, in the image before, where you could see the majority of the crowns there, although this one starts creeping closer to the front, majority of gold crowns like that are going to be placed in the back of the mouth because you don't see them. Whereas PFM, what you have the luxury of being able to do is you can shade that porcelain to pretty much match anybody's natural tooth color. And that's why they use it. So they still want the strength and the malleability of making the crown out of metal, but then fusing porcelain over top of it. When you place it towards the front of the mouth, almost nobody will be able to know that that's a prosthetic. So that's why a PFM is probably more widely used, but also because once upon a time, palladium was worth significantly less than platinum, and then it became worth significantly more than platinum. Today, it's a different story. Platinum has overtaken the value once again. But there's also been a big drop-off in metal prosthetics to just what's taken place is just porcelain or even a zirconia material to make the crown without any metal at all. In fact, some dental offices now have what is called a CAD/CAM machine, which they can actually just...
What city are they in? New Orleans?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think somebody might not
Yeah,
on...
New Orleans.
So the all zirconia materials have taken place of the metal because they can actually make these prosthetics right there in their office while a patient waits. So this is what some of these prosthetics start to look like after they've gone through the cremation process. So something that we get asked a lot is, doesn't the metal just sort of evaporate or burn off or even melt in the cremation process? And the answer is no. The reason why is the melt temperature for the metals that are primarily used, which would be gold and palladium, are way higher than the average melt temperature, or I guess burn temperature in a retort, which is about 1600 degrees, maybe 1800 degrees if it's a high volume crematory that's been burning a lot all day. But that still doesn't reach the melt temperature of just about 2000 degrees for gold and about 2800 degrees for palladium. So this is what's left behind. The one on the left is how we have received it, and they likely didn't have a processor that these went through. They probably just pulled them out. Whereas on the right, you can see a processor with the spinning blades that's breaking down the cremated remains, the bone, to finer cremated remains. Also knocks all of that porcelain or tooth structure. It sort of breaks all that down into a powder as well, and kind of sort of erodes a little bit the metals there that were used. So this is what two, essentially the same thing, but two different types of metal post-cremation look like. So then we get into some of the higher temperature metals. These are going to be, for hip and shoulders, knees, back braces, you name it. These are going to be the sort of bigger orthopedic prosthetics. These are never going to be made out of precious metal. They will, again, the prosthetics that are used in dental can be precious metal, and sometimes will also be non-precious metal, but these are just a few of the metals that we come across. Some of the two types that are most common for like a hip replacement or a shoulder or knee replacement are going to be a cobalt chrome moly alloy or a titanium vanadium alloy. So these are always going to be a non-precious, because it would just, there'd be no way you could actually make them out of any of the precious metals. They would just be totally cost prohibitive to do. Something people think often is that titanium If they have some titanium scrap, it's worth a ton, when in reality it's almost worthless at that point, because it's essentially contaminated and it has to go through the process of becoming pure titanium again, and it's just not worth that much. Very expensive to fabricate. The metal itself, not nearly as valuable. So this is what it looks like when we get a drum sent in from a crematory. We actually separate it out by the different types of metals. We can identify what a F75, which is a cobalt-based alloy, looks like versus a titanium alloy, or even just a stainless steel, or different types of stainless steel alloys. And the reason why we do that is because when we ultimately sell off these metals, the people who are buying them so that they can fabricate, actually refine down even further and fabricate new things, somebody who wants titanium may not want the cobalt or the stainless steel. So it's very important for us to separate out all those different types of metals. And what you can see there is, while we're sorting through it, we're actually finding little tiny bits of metal that can potentially be high value. So that's why it's very important, we feel, to actually sort through it by hand, every single drum, until we get to a completely clean table there, and we're sure we've separated out all the different types of metal.
Just real quick, I do have a question that has come in. It says,
Sure.
is there, I think you may have addressed it, but I'll ask it because it was asked.
Sure.
Is there a difference in value for metals used as prosthetics, vanity, or other medical devices, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we, the way we function, our company, but I think the majority do, is anything that is deemed sort of high value for us goes to its own melt. I'll show you that in a little bit here. I'll get into that. Anything else is we just lump it in together and essentially pay $2 a pound for it. There are some organizations and some companies that get higher than that, but because of their volume. But this stuff is really a loss leader to be able to get, so the higher value materials, plus it's providing a service to the crematories that they need. That's where it would really become a problem for any crematory, is what do they do with the hundreds of pounds, in some cases thousands of pounds of these heavy metals that aren't biodegradable, so they can't just wind up in a landfill. So we do offer that service, but we do pay for the shipping and the containers and all of that kind of stuff. To put it into further perspective, titanium, when we're selling it off, we're probably getting anywhere between 50 and 70 cents a pound. Mind you, I just said we pay $2 a pound. Some of the other metals like cobalt can be worth about $6 a pound. So, full transparency, it's a wash at best when it comes to the heavier metals versus the higher value, potentially higher value dental prosthetics. That's really where all of the value is going to come from. If I didn't answer that completely enough, I'm happy to if you need to interrupt again for me to further answer, I'm happy to do it. Another.
There's been no follow-up so far. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Pacemakers is another question that we get often. Do we take them? Can we process them? So pacemakers, what we have found, it's a very arduous process. Like a lot of things, like the hips and the knees, these were designed to go into a person and help that person, and then that's it. The process of actually recycling them later can become expensive. Pacemakers, the same. These were not designed to be easily taken apart, which is a good thing. So it's a very difficult process to actually uncover these or sort of essentially split them open and get any of the potential value out of it. Fortunately, every funeral home has a few options. One is you can send them to us and we can execute, the option that we have decided on. But one of the others is what's featured there is that happens to be a Medtronic, but Boston Scientific is another big one. All of these makers will be happy to send you boxes that you can send them back to them. And I'm guessing they'll perform some R&D on them to see how long they lasted, how did they function. The other that we have opted for is there is a nonprofit that is run out of the University of Michigan called My Heart, Your Heart. And what they do, as what it may sound like, is they try to refurbish as many as they can to become a functional, or to get the rest of the sort of life cycle out of that pacemaker. And they go to countries where people there maybe otherwise would not have been able to get one, and they're performing a sort of Doctors Without Borders type effort. And so that's what we do with them. There is, however, some of the wire at the end of the, or I should say the coil at the end of the wire, as you're seeing here. This might look familiar to you. Tony, is the video showing up okay? I'm going to take that as a yes. So as you can see,
I'm sorry, it takes me so long to find the mute button. Yes, it's working.
So this is, if I can go back for a second here, sorry, this would be more of like the stainless tungsten wire, as you can see. So this is out of a crematory. So the wire that's underneath, that would be on the left side, is going to be like a stainless or a tungsten. And you can see when you put it to flame, it chars up pretty quickly. It's not going to melt down because, as I said, it's got a way higher melt temperature than just that flame. It takes really pretty serious furnaces to melt it. This is a bundled up ball of platinum iridium wire. And just I've always just found it cool. These platinum group metals are so heat resistant that you could literally take it to flame, get it white hot, and then remove it from that flame. And as you can see, it's glowing, and then it goes right back to looking completely untarnished, exactly like it did before you put it in. So whether that's 10 seconds or it's an hour and a half, it doesn't matter. It's so heat resistant that it won't char. So we can see in that, as I showed you, that drum that was dumped out, it's kind of dusty. It's sort of, it's been charred. It's been through a crematory retort, but the platinum will always still stick out like a sore thumb because it's shiny and bright and ready to be used again. So yeah, there is some value. It's very minimal because it doesn't weigh much, but there can definitely be some platinum that is left behind by way of the pacemaker wire.
And I have another question here. It says, is there a difference in the cremation? Does the cremation process, flame or water, have an effect on metal recovery? So is aquamation different from flame cremation, et cetera?
Yeah, so another good question. So there's obviously the difference. As far as collection goes, I would say no, or even recoverable value, no. The interesting thing for anybody out there who has seen both, going through traditional flame cremation, as I said, some of it chars, some of it tarnishes, for lack of a better word. Some of it will look a different color. The F75, if anyone remembers when I said when we dump out the drum, we can tell the difference between them, because what used to look like on the picture that I was showing there several slides ago, a bright silvery hip or knee replacement, just by looking at that, I wouldn't be able to tell, because the titanium actually looks just like the cobalt chrome alloy. One does weigh a little bit more, but the titanium will after being going through the cremation process, will look sort of like a rust color, and the cobalt-based alloy will take on a green sort of tint. So just by the different color alone, we can tell. Going through alkaline hydrolysis, it looks exactly like it did when it went in. So I guess it's a tad easier because you can see gold crowns, for instance, stick out, pretty obviously. The hips and the knees from the crematories that use AH that we work with, several are universities, but some are private. But we actually take those pieces to a sander, and we scuff off the serial number to make sure that they're not used again, although we're not really concerned with that totally, but it is out of our hands a little bit. So we at least essentially file down the serial number to make sure that they couldn't be used again. So yes, they are going to look very different. One's going to look like it's brand new, and the other is not at all. So proper collection, I would say, starts with a separating processor. These are becoming more mainstream now. Once upon a time, maybe 5-6 years ago, about 10% of the time, people would know what I was talking about when I said a separating processor. Now they're a lot more commonplace, and they do exactly what they sound like they do. They actually, when you take the cremated remains out of the retort, they've cooled down, and now you're ready to actually process them down to the cremated remains, ashes that you're going to hand back to the family. You need to put it through a processor. Well, the sort of antiquated style didn't have any way to actually pull out any of the small bits of metal, whether that's a screw or a snap from a gown or a staple from a casket. None of that. It would all be collected and essentially put back into the cremated remains unless you actually sifted through them. Well, a separating processor at the base of its chamber actually has a really nice durable screen that doesn't allow anything larger than 2 millimeters from passing through. So again, whether that's what you see on the screen, which is potentially high value dental prosthetics, or it's a bunch of screws or snaps or staples, things that are non-organic that you don't want going back with the family, a separating processor will actually do essentially that cleaning for you. So it serves not only that purpose, but it also puts quite literally in your hands all these little bits of metal that would have been really difficult for you to find by hand. And remember, precious metals and even quite a few non-precious metals are not magnetic. So simply running a magnet over it is not going to solve that problem for you. A magnet can be nice to pull out some of it, but essentially you're going to need something that's going to recover or prevent all of it from passing through. Separating processor or an absolute godsend. I can't remember the last time we recommended or put one in a crematory where they didn't reach out to thank us for making the suggestion. It really has made the operator's life that much easier. You're still going to pull out the big pieces like hips and knees, back braces. I even say, pocket knives or, the steel toe from a steel toe boot. You're still going to want to pull these things out that are pretty big and obvious because they could damage the blades. But it's going to handle the recovery for literally everything else. They're really nice. These are just some images. I believe this is both the Matthews version. FT, Facultative, North America, makes an absolute gorgeous one as well. They come with a very big price tag, but there are some reasonably priced ones out there. Both Matthews and B&L and Bryant Crematory Services all make one that are in the $16,000 to $18,000 range delivered. Whereas the FT and the Matthews higher volume ones are going to be in the $45,000 to $55,000 range. So unless you're a really high volume crematory, like about 1,500 cases annually and up, one of the other units that I talked about in that $18,000 range are totally suitable. These things are going to last you 20 plus years with very little maintenance. So now that you've collected the metal and you've separated out into if you decide to use a separate little jar for the high value dental stuff, what do you do now? And this is the actual process of what we do. So now that we've gotten your metal and we've sorted it on the separating table there, and we've separated out the hips, the knees, and those kinds of prosthetics from the dental. Once we've weighed it in and we've assigned it its own lot number, the first thing we're going to do, of course, is smelt it. So we're going to actually put this into a furnace and melt it down. I don't believe we showed the copper stage, but we do add copper to it. The reason why we add copper to these is there's going to be 20 plus different elements that are contained in the scrap that you're sending in. Copper helps to sort of mediate, for lack of a better way of putting this. Some metals don't really work well together, and copper is a good mediator for that, to essentially bring them all together, because we need to have a homogeneous pour in order for us to be able to accurately sample it and analyze it. So sampling, what essentially is this? So what I always like to say is, think of the best analogy I can give, rather, I should say, is you go to the doctor and they're going to draw blood to test your cholesterol. They're not simply going to look at you to try and gauge what your cholesterol level is. They're going to actually draw blood and send that to their lab to perform an analysis on it. So we put a little glass tube into the molten metal and we pull it out, and that is essentially drawn blood. That is pulled some of that metal from that melt. So we're able to then take that little bit of metal that's going to then go on to the assay lab, which is right down the hall in our building, to actually perform the assay. So the bar of metal that we're going to produce goes and gets locked up in a safe once it's been weighed, and the sample is what goes on to the lab. So once the metal has broken down and it's totally molten, we're ready to pour, and our melters just decades of experience collectively, and they know when the melt is ready, and they know the size of mold that they need to use based on how much material they put in. So any little bits of metal that you might have seen sort of splash off, or I guess I should say any bits of molten that you saw splash off, these are not little nuggets of gold, but in fact it's what we refer to as slag, which is the borax that we added to it. This is just little bits of glass that essentially popped off during the pouring process here. It's never going to be the metal. The metal is actually the heaviest part, so that's going to rest at the bottom. And you'll see that here in a second. Once it breaks off there, as you can see, the metal would have been on the bottom. What you're seeing being scaled off here is, I touched on it, I apologize in the video here, I didn't show it, but we add borax, which is essentially glass. And the reason why we do that is what we want to happen in the melt is the borax will actually capture any of the tooth structure, for instance, or any of the porcelain that doesn't break down, any of the non-metallic material that's in that furnace. We want to get captured in the with the borax, which essentially becomes the slag, and all the metal is left to sort of homogenize by itself. So once we have that, once it's cooled down to work with, at least to a point where we can work with it again, we will then break off all of that slag at that point, and we will even sand it off and make sure that we have a clean bar with nothing else attached to it, so that when we weigh it, because this is a very important part of it, it's completely metal with nothing else. So the sample that I showed you, we put the glass tube into the melt, then makes a little pin sample. We then flatten it out because it's easier for our lab to actually perform the assays with it like that. What you're seeing there is we're just writing a lot number. Each individual melt gets its own lot number, essentially like a UPS or FedEx tracking number, so that it can be identified, because at this point it doesn't look anything like it did about 30 minutes before this, which was a collection of dental prosthetics. It is now a molten bar of metal. I'm sorry, not a molten bar of metal, but a smelted bar of metal. So these are the process. So going from putting essentially teeth into a furnace, taking the sample, letting it cool, cleaning it off, and then weighing it, that's that whole smelting process. Once we do that, and this is our lab at our facility there in Des Plaines, Illinois, is we have to perform an assay. Assay is a term that's not very common for crematory owners. It's essentially the exercise in determining the elemental composition of something. So when we take that sample and we perform an assay on it, it actually gives us the breakdown of precisely what's in there. What's being shown here is one of the types of assaying, which is XRF, or X-ray fluorescence. This is a really nice tool, and it's a very quick and easy way to do it. We wouldn't pay somebody based off of it because it's not nearly as precise as the fire/chemical assay that we perform as well, but an XRF assay can be done quite literally in less than a minute. And essentially every element on the periodic table gives off a frequency that an XRF machine then converts to a percentage. It's pretty close, but we don't operate in pretty close. We operate in absolute precision. So while it can take a minute, which is great, so if we're standing in front of or with a client who wanted to come to see their metal get melted, they can see some results for the first time with us in under a minute. whereas the process here that you're seeing little video clips of, this takes about 24 hours. So obviously they wouldn't be there to witness this. This is a long, sort of drawn out process where they're actually melting it down to be able to recover the exact weights of all of the metals that we're looking to get the percentages of. So this is why the, sorry, do you have a question?
Just a real quick one, because you mentioned the 24 hours, and there's a question here that says, how long does this take front to back? And they thank you, first of all, thank you for the videos. They provide some great visuals of the process. How long is the overall process in the door to all totaled out, I guess?
Yeah, so when we have a lot of clients who take the opportunity to actually come and watch their metal get melted, which is great. We in fact, we encourage all of our clients to do it once, walk the floors and see, meet the guys who are doing it and, meet the people, behind the scenes at our company. But when anybody comes to do that, from the time we check it in till it goes into the furnace, it gets, poured out, it cools down a little bit, we scale it down and we take the sample and we walk down the hall to the lab. Me performing an XRF assay front to back is probably about 45 minutes to an hour. That's again to get that sort of quick ballpark assay result is 45 minutes to an hour. If then to go through that whole process, it takes about 24 hours. And what I base that on is from the time these samples go into the lab, I know the absolute earliest I'm going to get it is the next morning. And typically it'll be the next afternoon. So that's why I referenced the 24 hours. We could, if we absolutely had to, go from start to finish in the quickest amount of time possible, could probably do it in about 10 hours. So if somebody got it in at lunchtime, I could probably get it done by the next morning if it was life and death. But fortunately, we don't run across those situations. But
excellent, thank you.
Yeah. It is a great experience, though. Again, everybody should consider it at least once. So these are just some helpful tips. I understand the position I'm in, which is I represent the company that I'm with, and I hope they don't come off as too biased. And I hope I'm really just trying to give what I know to be the absolute truth, are just some helpful tips that you should be looking for. First thing is a comprehensive, detailed report. I see time and time again, and I think I'm going to give some examples here of what a report looks like that is intentionally omitting some key things. But on our reports, what we always have, first thing is how much did the crematory send in? So that's the weight received. In this case, heel added. Heel, I've been talking about copper. That's a heel in this case is another word for, did you add something to heal the metal? In this case, it would be copper. Typically about 1.5 or 1.25 times the incoming weight is what the smelter will decide to add in. Weight after melt, to me, this is one of the most important numbers, probably even more important than the weight received or the heel added, because this is what your bar weighed once it cooled down and it hardened. So it's a very important number, and I'll touch on it in a second. Sample returned, I talked about the sample a few times here. We, as a matter of practice, we cut that sample into 4 pieces. Two of which go to the lab, one being a backup in case somehow something happened to it, and we would still have a backup. The third piece is sealed in case it needs to go to what's called umpire, which is essentially somebody, I can't remember the legal term, when a modern mediator, somebody who can basically say, I don't care about the results, but what I say is what is final. Fortunately, in cremation, I think in the 10 years we've been in it, we have yet to do one. Some of our pawn or jeweler customers, maybe twice a year out of the thousands of lots that we do. And then the 4th sample that's set aside is for our client. Every single melt that we do, a piece of that sample is set aside if our client wants to take it, so they can then go to an assay lab, send it to them. That lab would have no idea what has been reported to them. It essentially puts in our clients' hands the ability to audit us every single time. In this case, the client doesn't take it. They're a longtime client, so the settlement weight is the same thing as the after melt weight. So from there, AU is gold, AG, silver, PT, platinum, PD, palladium. You can go across the board and say what percentage of each metal. So when we're doing the assay, in this case, the assay came back at 11.15% gold. Well, if you multiply that into the after melt weight, you will get 15.90 ounces. That's what was actually contained in actual ounces of gold. In this case, it should be very clear what is the fee, or in this case, it's sort of backwards, but we pay 90% to our clients. So that takes the actual content down to a payable weight of 14.31 ounces, which happens to be just shy of a pound of gold. I bet everybody would love a pound of gold right about now. So then we take that same, you can do that exercise for all four of those metals. You can then go down to the pricing, where again, you can follow AU being gold. What was the going rate for gold on, as you can look up at the top, the date was June 17th, 2020, $1,723.20, which brings the total for their gold to $24,671.05, and you can carry that down to all of the metals. To put into context, today, gold is trading at just shy of $3,300 an ounce. So this settlement here on the gold alone would have been about $50,000 as opposed to the $24,600. So any other fees? Yes, in our case we do. You could probably imagine that assay process is not cheap. It takes time. It takes people who are chemists by trade, and we charge $100 melt and assay fee essentially just to sort of offset some of that cost. I don't think any of our competitors do, but in an effort to be transparent, we need to charge something in order to perform that task. So then it brings you down to the net payment. So to me, that represents a very comprehensive reporting or analysis of the metal that was sent in. We take that as that, meaning you're sending your metal in and you're asking me to analyze this metal for you and properly report that to you, and then of course buy it from you and pay you for it. Some of our competitors, I assure you, these are actual settlement statements. I have whited out their name because I don't mean to, sort of poke fun, but just trying to highlight missing key information. In this case, no mention of at all what was sent in. No mention at all of what the bar weighed after it was poured out. No mention of a sample being set aside for a client so that they could essentially fact check them. No percentage of each metal. In this case, it just simply says, I didn't highlight it there, but gold at 2.042 ounces. And then, in my opinion, the rates aren't clearly itemized here, but in this case, also showing a 98% return, which in my opinion is completely unrealistic. So I can relate it to any of the owners of funeral homes and crematories out there. You're not likely working on a 2% gross profit margin. So in this case, to me, this is a completely incomplete, by design, attempt at a analysis report, but it doesn't really give this client much to look at. Much of the same here. Again, no mention of what the bar weighed after it was melted. No mention of what each individual metal's percentage of that bar was. And again, unrealistic rates of return. No mention of any other fees to actually process the metal. So to me, these are things that you should absolutely be looking for. A simple thing to do if you're wanting to call a recycler to try them out, maybe you met them at a trade show, or for some other reason you want to give somebody a try. The first thing you should ever do before trying them is ask them to send you a sample of their settlement report. This will give you a glimpse, at least, into what you should expect as far as reporting goes. Something to me that's very important, I've touched on it a little bit at least, of saying how interesting I think it is and how important it is to at least once go and visit your recycler's facility. So they should at least have a policy in place that allows you to do this. I realize it may not be totally practical time-wise, location wise to be able to do it, although I did reference we're about 15 minutes from O'Hare Airport, so it can be easy to get in and out of. But I absolutely think you should do it, especially if you do 500 or more cremations a year. You could be talking about 25, 30, even $35,000 and higher annually. So can you visit their facility is the first question you should be asking. Number two, I've touched on it a bit. Are you offered a sample? Are you offered a sample without asking for it? To me, this is very important. Like I said, we quite literally put the ability in your hands for you to audit us and essentially fact check the numbers that we're giving you. So to me, I wouldn't work with somebody who would not who would not offer up a sample without me asking for it. References are great. So I talked a little bit there for a second about visiting the facility. In some cases, it's just not going to work. So what's the next best thing? Well, ask for some really comprehensive references. These are examples on the right are not a example of a comprehensive reference. They don't really go into any detail about anything. Whereas this one here, I referenced Marie Palmieri from Ewing Cemetery. She had a great approach. She was working with a recycler. She had gone to some trade shows. Of course, any big trade show you go to these days, NFDA, ICCFA, or even CANA, there's going to be 5, 6, even as many as 8 recyclers that are there. How are you to tell the difference? It's very difficult for you. I don't envy the position you're in, but what she did was a great method. Is she chose 4. So she was already working with one, and then she chose 4 other recyclers, and she took her normal load, bit higher volume, so she was able to do this with a little bit more efficiency. But she would send in every month, so she was able to send 2 normal loads to one, then to the second, then to the third, and then finally the fourth. So after this 8-month period, she had some really good data on how to make that choice. How was their customer service? How were the returns? How much money was sent back? How quickly were they doing it? So this was the absolute best way that I think somebody could handle it. I recognize if you're doing 250 or even 500 cremations, you're going to recycle 3, maybe 4 times a year. It's a little bit tougher for you to do, also because one recycling load compared to just one other isn't always going to be exactly the same, of course. So it can be tough, but it could be something similar can be done over time. But in lieu of doing that, you can also just reach out to people. You should ask that recycler for somebody to give you a really comprehensive reference who could go into detail why they chose you, who did they work with before, and why did they make the switch? Have they been to your facility? Things like that. So absolutely, you should be asking for those kinds of references before you get involved. And I will say, because I don't think I touch on it here, we're wrapping up here shortly, but my opinion, I don't think anybody should be signing a term agreement with any recycler. The closest we get to that is we will work with some crematories depending on their volume and the demographics of the cases that they have. We will work with them to put a separating processor in their facility, and we have an agreement for that as far as the repayment is concerned. But there are some that offer I'm using air quotes here in case you can't see me, to give you a free processor. Well, it's only free as long as you work with them. And as soon as you stop, they're going to take that out of your facility, and they may lock you into a 2, 3, or even 5-year agreement. My opinion to you is I wouldn't be signing any sort of term agreement. You should be working with a recycler because you're happy to be working with them, not because you feel obligated to.
I have another question for you.
Sure.
How do you see metal recycling evolving over the next 10 years? I guess especially as cremation comes up. Oh, look at this. How's that for a softball question?
Yeah, I mean, it's this gets into that a little bit, but I think there are a couple of things at play, and sometimes that question is posed to me from the perspective of haven't they heard that metal is going down in dental practice, meaning it's being used less and less, and it is, but it is still being used. I always answer it this way: if today across the board, every dental practice said, we're no longer placing metal prosthetics in the mouth. This would go on, my best guess, another 30 years. I'm 51 and I've got probably 8 gold prosthetics in my mouth. And if I play my cards right, I'm going to be alive for another 30, 35 years. So those will still be sitting there because they've been in there for, in some cases, 25 years. So these are designed to stand the test of time. So even if they stopped completely, this would still be found in crematories nationwide. When I first got in this business in 2001, I marketed to dental laboratories. That's where it's made. So that's the absolute very beginning and the pulse of what's happening. I'm now shifted to the end of it, which is sort of the last responders, right? So this is where you're seeing the end. What the metal we're getting today from someone who was cremated last week or 3 months ago, that could have been placed over 50 years ago. So what's happening today isn't really as relevant to crematory owners as much as it would be for a dental laboratory. So I hope that answers that question. How else will it evolve over the next 10 years? Well, it's just going to grow because cremation is growing. So the need for it is there. Again, I don't want to just put all the focus on the high value because that's where the money is. That can be contained in a small jar, whereas we send out 11-gallon drums. Those can easily have 50, 65, 100 pounds of metal in there. Well, what else were you going to do with it? You were going to be tasked with properly recycling this metal. And if there wasn't this high value metal, you probably wouldn't have nearly as many recyclers looking for just the sort of lower value metals. So if you have your own crematory, you're going to do more, and you're going to see more of these metal prosthetics. So I would say that's how it's going to evolve. I hope that answered the question. If not, give me a follow-up question to it, but I'll touch on this. So a lot of times people like to sort of intuitively what's technology today in the palm of our hands. There can be good, there can be some bad. If you have a teenage daughter, it can be really bad because their eyes are glued to TikTok or some version of something. But what's also neat is you could be in the airport in Nashville, where I've happened to have bought a pair of headphones before, thinking bet if I was at a Best Buy back home in my hometown, I'd be getting this for 25% cheaper. No, you wouldn't actually. In this case, I could find out, and they're selling it for the exact same price. Why? Because they need to be competitive, because everyone can have in the palm of their hands the ability to compare, where can I get this cheaper or a better deal, right? And so we intuitively want to be able to do this. Well, how much are you paying versus your competitor? When it comes to this, I hope I've demonstrated a little bit at least that there's a lot to it to actually determine exactly what the value is. And here are some of those things. Market price. So I pointed out the gold market, for instance, on the example that I gave, was at about $1,700 per ounce. The palladium was at about $1,800 an ounce. Today, palladium is just shy of $1,000, so it's down $900 from 5 years ago, but gold is almost double what it was since then. So you could do absolutely nothing different and one time to the next. In fact, very real time, I recently had pointed out to a client who sends in about every 6 months. They sent in last time in November, gold was trading at about $2,400 an ounce, maybe it was October, and then they sent in back in April, it was just over $3,300 an ounce. They did absolutely nothing different, and they're getting nearly a $700 to $750 difference from market alone. So keep your eye on the gold market, and just to sort of get an idea of where precious metals are trading for. What is the demographic of your client? I always separate this into two categories. One would be working class and up. And I always say the janitor and the CEO are going to the same dentist. Okay, this is why going to the dentist is expensive. And this is why there's very little, if no, good dental insurance. Because if you need to get a gold crown, it's probably about $1,500 for that crown these days. The other would be low income. So these are people who probably had to have Medicaid or Medicare. I know one kicks in when you're in your retirement age, but one is for lower income, or marginalized people who don't get a dental program through their job or don't have a job. those programs don't call for precious metals to go into dental prosthetics, whereas working class and up very easily could have had very good dental insurance. So typical question I will ask is what percentage of the cremations you do fall into what category? Any that would be in that lower income category, I pretty much take that number out of your annual volume. If you did 1,000 and 20% of them were low income, as far as recycling goes, you really do 800. Because what we then like to do is, as you can see on the right, if I'm jumping forward, you can see this number is actually probably a little more accurate at about $50 to $60 per cremation these days. But you can take that number and just multiply it by that, and that's a good baseline of where you should be. How you're collecting the small bits of metal is also very important. I apologize, I can't remember if I have a slide dedicated directly to security. It does happen. There are a couple different ways that we've seen it where, an operator who's, otherwise a great employee has been very loyal. You put a tiny little ball of gold that could be worth, $50 in their hand, and they start seeing, dozens of these every week. It doesn't take long for somebody to, get the bright idea. Not to mention, sometimes you as the crematory owner may have decided who you're going to use as a recycler. Sometimes the operator has also decided who they are going to use as their recycler, because sometimes you're not the person that the recycler is calling to try and get the business. So keep that in mind, that it is a good idea to keep an eye on this, whether that's putting a camera in place or there's some sort of protocol where the small bits of metal get locked up every night. I'm happy to talk with anybody about ideas of what to do. Hopefully it just isn't an issue and you've got great people working for you. So that kind of touched on the how are you storing the metal. But my opinion, just dumping everything into the drum is a great idea. And, we are going to recover it all. So there's no real benefit unless you're putting it into a safe to keep it in a small separate container. So I didn't touch on the bottom part there in the bottom right corner. As I use a $50 or $60 per cremation as a baseline, believe it or not, we have some crematories that can generate upwards even of $150 per cremation. So I'll do the quick math for you. If they do 1,000 cremations, yes, they can be generating $130,000 to $150,000 a year from their scrap recycling. It's been pointed out to me before that some people don't feel right taking the money, don't want to take the money. There are no shortage of charities out there that would love to get big checks from you. I have a lot of clients that do it. I have a lot of clients who have, opted to put a little committee together within their company, a review board, so to speak, or even open it up to every employee. Hey, come on, tell us why, you have your favorite charity that, is a local charity, is a national charity, is a charity within the industry. You can, the Funeral Service Foundation, of course, ICCFA's Educational Trust, Selected Independent, the Educational Trust. There are no shortage of them, even within your industry, that definitely need your help. And they can provide, they can provide great resources like education, scholarships, grants, and just resources for people who need to learn how to grieve or even research. So if you don't want the money, I shouldn't say often, I hear at times crematory saying, well, I just give the money away, so I don't really care. Well, the easy response to that is, well, if you gave $1,000 last year, would have you rather given $10,000 last year? The answer should be yes, you would have. So that's why even if you're just donating the money, you should be concerned about how much you're generating from your recycling. You want to be able to give back as much as possible. The last thing I'll say about donating the money is think of this as an extension of your marketing budget. If you've looked at whether it be a Little League baseball team or a hospice in your area, a food bank, a church, you name it, there are so many things in your community that need your help. This is a great way for you to not only be able to give, but to be able to give pretty large amounts of money. Again, if you're doing 500 cremations a year, you really should easily be able to generate $25,000, $30,000, maybe even $35,000 annually. you can cut $5,000 checks to 7 different charities in that case. So it's a great way to spread some goodwill in your community. Something I get asked often as well is a legal question. We actually had Chris Farmer from the Farmer Group years ago create 3 options that you can find on our website. Apologize, here they are. That you can actually just cut and paste. They're the ones that about halfway down start with I, we, authorize, fill in your funeral home to separate these metals and so on. You are federally mandated to properly recycle these materials. So letting your families know that you are, and you're doing this in accord with what you know, your state and national EPA are asking you to do, but you're also telling them that you're doing. You're disclosing to them that this is what you're doing, and you're working with what should be an EPA permitted recycling facility to facilitate this. So you're welcome to go to our website to download this form and cut and paste whichever one suits you the best. This is the CANA and ICCFA joint statement on waste recycling. It's really, this just touches on what is the actual code of federal regulations, CFR 40. If you're looking for a light read like War and Peace, dig into CFR 40. It's only about 1,000 pages long, but in essence, what it says is you are required to properly recycle this. If you have a cemetery, you know, I've encountered quite a few who just dig up a big, you know, plot of land back there and dump it all there. Technically, you're not allowed to do that. This could seep into the groundwater, so you are not allowed to essentially dispose of what could be considered hazardous waste. Landfills as well, this is not where it should be ending up. Recycling really is the only way to sort of solve that issue. Not to mention these metals go and become new things that we all need. So it does actually keep costs down. So you don't have to be a hacky sack hitting Prius driving hippie to think recycling is effective. It truly is, trust me, and it does keep costs down. So that's all I have for you. The contact information is there. That is our website. That's the absolute best way to, we have some really good videos on there. We have some good photos that actually goes through that whole process if I went too fast or didn't explain something well enough. Also, it's got the downloadable legal form I talked about, and of course, contact info for me as well. I would be your contact for anything regarding recycling.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Let's give it another couple seconds to see if anybody has any more questions, but we got a couple as we went along, and everything was very clear to me. Is that it? This will be the last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you so very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you this again. Welcome back. I am Tony Russo, and we are getting ready to start this second round of our webinar or live event, the Cremation Innovation Strategies. Next, we are going to have Brent Thorson of Terry Bear, and he's going to be talking about reaching out to your community, and we're going to bring him on right now. Are you with us here? Welcome. All right, I'm going to turn over. I'm going to turn over the controls to him, and just like last time, if you have any questions, we got a late question. Great videos and very informative. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know if Kevin's still with us. I think Kevin's back at his table at the conference. So we're going to turn it over to Brent, and I will be a disembodied voice until it's my turn to close this out. And again, ask questions as we go along, and I'd be happy to get them answered for you. All right. Good luck.
So everyone's able to see my screen. Great. Welcome to a discussion day. Obviously is about cremation innovation. And really, I would like to go through just kind of, 5 ways that you can sort of catapult your firm when it comes to cremation. So my name is Brent Thorson, and I'm the Client Success and Growth Manager for Terry Bear Urns and Memorials, and also our new cremation container brand called Life Art. And so for those of you that don't know, Terry Bear is one of the leading industry's largest suppliers of cremation urns, cremation memorial products. We've been in business now for over 35 years based out of our St. Paul location. And really, I just feel very lucky to be involved with our distributors, funeral homes and families seeking cremation memorial products. I have been in the industry for over 13 years, both on the cemetery and the funeral home side of our business. And again, today I'm just here to talk about cremation as an opportunity. And obviously, we know this is the next generation's biggest challenge as we continue to move into higher cremation rates. And the truth is, every funeral home or cremation business wants more cremation calls, and families, they don't always know where to find this because they might not even know that your cremation services exist. I bring this story up every time I talk about this topic. I went to a presentation in New York, and they were presenting stats from a local survey on people seeking cremation options in their community. And I was astounded with all of the people they had surveyed. 70% didn't even know that their local funeral home even offered cremation service. And it really just made me realize, wow, sometimes we are too close to what we do. We get insulated by our business, focusing on what we do, and we don't always take a step back and look at it from the other side, from the public view, the public perspective, for people searching for cremation. So it's important to take a step back and think about what is the message that families are getting from you and locally in your markets about cremation. So with that said, there's one thing that I certainly know about cremation, and that is that the opportunity is huge, but many firms certainly get discouraged. And like I said, the question is, do cremation families know where to find you? Are cremation families finding you where they are looking? Now in our industry is the time for innovation, discussion, and cremation options are an opportunity that we all have to commit to. There's an idea that cremation can bring revenue for funeral homes, and it can continue to serve our families' ability to celebrate their loved ones. So, the truth is there are just a lot of people looking for cremation options, which brings me to my first point here. So let's dive into the opportunity a bit more. You can see here, the opportunity around serving more cremation families is truly huge. So it's 500,000 plus people per month that search for cremation in the United States alone. So that's more than 6 million people per year who are going to Google and looking for cremation services. So we'll dive further more into local markets and what this could look like for you. But I just want to stay here for a minute, and if you could even sort of drop in the chat if you didn't know this or you did know this. It's 6 million people per year, again, are looking for this online. So this is a huge, huge opportunity. So don't forget that 30,000 foot view I just showed you. As I said, I've been in the cremation memorial product market for a while, and I feel lucky because I have that 30,000 foot view across the country. We also work with overseas firms internationally, so we really get to understand kind of what's happening all across the country. And what I've learned, and this is when I ask funeral homes or funeral directors about why families choose them. Typically the answer is always, we provide the best service, we have the best service, and you all focus on that and do provide that. I've seen it time and time again. But if everybody's offering best service and all of you are in your markets offering best service, the question becomes, are you best known? And so, relating this to cremation, I would put this in the camp of, are you best known for families searching for cremation? So that's the question I put on here. And so, just asking that question over and over again, I think there are two different things we're talking about. There's best service, which a lot of you are doing that. But it's about becoming best known for cremation. So this is the stats. Obviously, we all have seen this before. 60% of Americans now choose cremation. It's increasing by 21% in the next 20 years. This might be lower or higher than what you're currently experiencing, depending on where you're located. But we do know that this will only continue to increase. So, you know, the reality is people are going to be searching as this increases. And, you know, the gap is that everyone knows this stat. I mean, most of us on this call, I'm assuming, probably do. But not everybody is choosing your funeral home if you served them in the past anymore. Unfortunately, it's just not the way the world works. You know, we all have one of these in our pocket. So this is where we're going, mostly thanks to the internet. So it's a lot harder, and we have to really work for those calls today. You know, in my perspective at Terry Bear, I hope we can talk through a couple things that can open up some doors to you on being best known for cremation. You know, I mentioned we're one of the largest distributors of urns in our industry, and I see a lot of bestsellers, changing trends, and I want to offer some things here that can hopefully help you to, you know, be best known. That's again what we want to focus on. So what it takes. So I want to go through a few different things today, and I think it's really important again for us to take a step back and look at our markets every once in a while. So first, I want you to understand your market better. So you need to understand your market's demand for cremation. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you get people that information from you. I also want to talk about setting up your website for cremation success. And then I also am going to use a few of our most popular and recent product launches to sort of inspire everyone to think about cremation products differently, because of course, when you do that, we have seen this time again, you can open some new doors. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to be best known for cremation. So again, that's different than best service, but best known. So part one, understanding your market. That's really what I want to focus on first. So understand what people are searching for. So you saw this before, but 500,000 people in the US search for cremation services every single month, as a reminder. And then what this means for different market sizes is variation in the searches, of course. So I took as an example here a small, medium, and large market size. Hopefully each of you can relate to one of these, or at least draw some conclusions. So, you know, small market, Greenville, South Carolina, with population of about 75,000. They have about 2,450 searches for cremation every month. A medium-sized market like Buffalo, New York, about 275,000 population. Obviously, that jumps up about 3,900 searches. And the last one is that large market, that Seattle market, 750,000 people. So you're at 6,100 searches per month. So hopefully you can garner from this that, you know, it's varied, but people, again, are looking for it in each of these size markets. And if you are wondering how many local families are searching for you, you can take out your phones and scan this, pull up your camera, scan this QR code, and this form actually goes right to me, and I will get your local numbers for how many people search for cremation services in your market. So you can see, you know, what the opportunity there is in your market. So, you know, take a minute, scan this again, and enter your information, and I will get back to you with some of your, you know, exact numbers in your area. All right, so that's kind of your market. Step two is talking about setting up your website to attract them. So again, the reality is many people are searching for cremation, but not everybody is choosing your funeral home just because you've served them in the past. So like I said, we don't search for things the same way. It really is work to get these calls. So that makes your website absolutely vital to attracting new cremation families to you. It is really your front door and the first step for families in engaging with you. So we're going to talk about websites, and we'll kind of do a little activity here in a little bit, but you know, I want to talk about the why. You know, again, the reality is most places simply aren't known for cremation. And oftentimes we don't proactively educate and inspire our communities about cremation. So, you know, I mentioned that New York survey, 70% of consumers didn't even know that the funeral home offered cremation in their home. So people are searching for it, And, you know, as we just talked over, there's the gap. So there's a gap that we need to fill to make sure that you are best known for cremation. So best known always wins over best. You know, if you want to be known for something, then you need to get it out there. You have to educate, you have to inspire, and you have to market cremation. It's so, so important. Again, best known always wins over best. So our advice really is just to be louder and be the first point of contact for people searching for cremation. So show up when people search for cremation. You know, a win for you is to show up when they're there. So you want to capture all these people looking for cremation services, like the Google search there. Put the work into your website so you can show up when they search. You know, I hear oftentimes places say, oh, it's so much an investment, you know, web development, all the things you have to pay for. You know, is it worth it? When they search for it, it's because families want to learn about it or they want it. I mean, these are very high intent, meaningful interactions and could very easily be a call for you. So, you know, I think, yes, when I say add cremation to your website, I'm talking about information about cremation services, frequently asked questions about cremation, products, maybe even have a planning section for cremation. Provide a whole spectrum rather than a mention, you know, on a single page deep in your website. Coming from the product world, this is a huge question now. Are products available on your website? The competition online is only going to get more intense. You know, and unfortunately, this is true. You're competing now with Amazon. With them selling urns today, you have to get your products on your site. Many families, you know, don't have to buy from Amazon, but they only do because it's the only place they find urns and they shop them there. So is it time to start selling products on your website? Yes. Stop letting Amazon be the place that these families fall into. You know, get your products on your website. Be prepared to get ahead of the Amazon urn. Have a way for families to shop through you for cremation. This is so important as, again, that 21% keeps rising. So next, I want to do a little bit of an activity, a little exercise. So I want to focus on you and what you're doing in your local area in regards to cremation. So let's talk about cremation products here and websites. So if you take out your phone, the first thing I want you to do is to type in cremation in a Google search and your city. And so I'm going to go through, oops, sorry, go back here. I'm going to go through all these questions. And what I want you to do is I want you to rate yourself 1 to 5, with 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. And, you know, Tony, maybe you can tell me if there are people, you know, putting numbers in the chat. But I'd love you to put it in the chat. If you don't want to do that, obviously save this for yourself so you can kind of think about how you're rating yourself when it comes to cremation. So Google yourself, again, cremation and your area, your town. So the first question, rate yourself, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. Does your website show up first on Google? That's the first question. 1 to 5, where are you at?
If you'd like, I don't mind putting there's a funeral home like across the street from me. I can put them on the spot and answer.
There you go.
They come up first, but they are across the street from me. How's that?
Well, I looked up my town, you know, so the funeral home that I know very well, they came up 3rd. So I'd rate them about a 3 as example. So, well, good. So, you know, that's a good place to start. You know, does your website show up first on Google? So the next one to rate yourself would be, do you have a page on your website, a dedicated page to cremation, not something in your title or gets mentioned elsewhere, but do you have a dedicated page about cremation? So again, rate yourself, 1 being the best, 5 being not so many.
The one near me does not. I'm sure they must have a page. It is templated by a major templating company, but it does not have there's no word cremation on the first page. If you scroll down to the bottom, there is what we do after overview is funerals and cremation.
Right.
And if you
So,
have funeral,
and cremation, there's a perfect example, right? So, so
but there's
then,
no dedicated cremation page here.
right. So then the next question I would say is, does it talk about cremation options for families? So families don't even know what their choices are sometimes when it comes to cremation. Does the content actually cover anything when it's talking about cremation options? And then the next one, again, one's best, five's worst. Can you shop cremation products online? I just mentioned Amazon. Are you beating that? If they're not seeing it on your website, they're going there. So, have that up. Do you have products? And then the last one, rating 1 to 5 again, is can they plan a service online? I mean, that's something that's going to continue. Can they actually see what packages are? So on and so forth. So any input or questions from people who are on the call here, or anything further on that?
We don't have any takers right now. I do have two questions because I live in the rural South, so it is as expected. I wonder, do you find that you have funeral directors who are afraid to put their urns online because then people won't come in and ask about them? And how does, because I mean that's clearly what's happening with this guy here. He has everything that there's there are flowers, you can order flowers, you can do the those kind of things, but you can't buy any products on this website. And it's a modern website, so it's possible. It's just not one of the things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is a store on the web is the same as a store in town, right? So, if someone's going to your website to purchase something, they're purchasing that through you. And I mentioned the Amazon thing. You have to get ahead of that nowadays. With families choosing cremation, oftentimes they hear that they're just bringing the urn into the funeral home before they've even had a chance to talk about it. So if you're the first one that they're engaging with through their website and they're choosing you for cremation, have those products up. Be ready to have that and engage with families in that way. So yeah, good question. Okay, so let's kind of move forward, but you get what I'm getting at here. Families are looking for products like we just showed. Are they going to you to see those and search those? So it's important to get all of this information on your website, including every one of these options. So let's talk about products. We just touched on that briefly, but are you offering the right products when it comes to cremation? So part of standing out for cremation and getting more business is making sure you have what families want. So I've focused a lot on what they're searching for, maybe some things that you can improve. One stat that has always stood out to us when we're looking at what people are looking for online is that 300,000 plus people in America are searching for personalized funerals every month. So not every family wants nothing, and many are looking for ways to make things more personal. Actually, here's another QR code here. You can see your numbers by pulling out your phone and scanning this QR code, and I can get you your local market numbers for families that are looking for personalized funerals. So really, a strong way to stand out is to make things more personalized. And same for eco-friendly funeral options. I was reading the NFDA stats recently. I think it's now like 60% of consumers are looking for eco-friendly funeral options nowadays, and they care about this. And it's proof in the searches. 330,000 plus Americans search for this every month. So make sure that you're having these cremation options that families want. Do you have eco-friendly products? And again, I put this QR code up. You can see your numbers by pulling out your phone, scanning the QR code. And after I get that, I can get those numbers for you. So totally engage with us and say, hey, I want to know how many eco-friendly funeral option searches there are in my market. So again, I'll give you a minute to scan this and enter it in either for eco-friendly or the personalized funeral options. All right, so case study time. Looking at cremation products differently. Obviously, You know, I love sharing this because when it comes to cremation products, it's easy to get stuck in a rut and not get excited. You know, obviously you're feeling the pinch of cremation, and maybe, you know, at your location, you're already selling urns and jewelry and keepsakes, etc. But what if you took something that you already offer and you try to make it better? So it's one of the ways that, you know, your company can innovate. And this is exactly what we did with Life Art by Terry Bear. And I hope by me showing you this, you can start to see cremation products a little bit differently and maybe see how these could become new opportunities for the cremation engaged families that you have. So I'm going to read this. This is just a quote. The funeral home offered my sisters and me one final visit with Mom. And when we saw our beloved mother in a plain cardboard box, we were disappointed and heartbroken. We all wished we had been offered the option to choose something more personal and more dignified. A regretful family. So I'm sure most of you offered a standard cremation cardboard box. And families oftentimes don't even see this because they maybe choose one of your package, or it comes with a basic you know, service of cremation, and then you stopped there. But here's that gap. We know that 330,000 Americans are looking for personalized funerals, and we know funerals can oftentimes bring regrets for family. So what if you added something to your cremation container lineup that was a premium personal option? It can open doors to say, you know, let me show you what you're actually getting. I want to show you the cremation containers. Could this lead to more revenue, more gatherings, more services? And, you know, as you can see, more merchandise sales. Can you make the urn more personal? The keepsakes more personal? All of these things are sort of tied together. So don't take my word for it, but when you think about products differently, you can open doors for revenue. Now I'm showing this calculator as a sort of overview of thinking about just your cremation container options. So let's say you do 200 cremations a year. That's kind of at the top there. And your current price of your low cost container is $200. And you sell this more personalized option to customers for probably $1,695, maybe somewhere in that, up or down. And then it shows on the bottom of this, if you convert 10% of your low cost container choice within this, you can actually add $30,000 revenue just by converting 10%. So that's a pretty low bar. We think if you're showing this to families, they're going to choose the premium option oftentimes. And, you know, can you convert more than that 10%? How much potential revenue, you know, could you see increase at your firm? So we did put a link to the calculator here too. So take out your phone, scan that QR code, and you can play with your numbers a little bit and maybe think about how are we approaching this product category in order to make it a revenue generator for us. So as I said, you know, what if you could bring these cremation experiences into your showroom too? We have a funeral home that we worked with in Houston that they have our Life Art containers in their showroom, and he actually shows the basic cardboard box right next to it. And so really, when families come in, they see both, they understand pretty quickly what this means for them and how they engage with what they want for their loved one. So, you know, when you do have a new cremation product, talk about it. Again, I go back to what I said in the beginning. You have to be best known. You've spent the time to add it to your lineup, maybe your showroom, and don't forget to tell people about it. One thing, you know, that was really important to us when we were creating Life Art was to sort of have things for funeral homes and marketing materials to market the product so they can tell the story, tell their community. They have this now as an option for families. So you can see here, there's a press release, some social posts, and like a landing web page, those kinds of things. So again, talk about it. When you have it, talk about it. Be best known for it. And here's another example of thinking about a product slightly differently. So let's take Life Art a bit further. One design available is the Stars and Stripes. And with Memorial Day coming up, You know, I'm sure you're thinking about veterans, but what if you could think of products like this? There's a funeral home that we worked with in Pennsylvania that added a veterans section to their website, as example. They had a lot of great information. They covered all the options, product options, and they actually tripled their call volume and became a firm that served a lot of the military families in the military community. And it simply was, you know, in talking to them, it was like, well, we always have had these things. Yeah, but they became best known to serve those military families. So how are you doing that? How are you presenting your products to engage these certain families that are choosing cremation? Here's another example. So scattering urns. I don't hear a lot of funeral homes talking about this, but this is a major trend. In fact, I was at Cana last year. The Cana statistics, I think, put this at about 1/3 of all families choosing cremation choose scattering. So the question is, are you talking about this enough? Do families know they can do this and get the products from you? Are you asking about where the final disposition is? You know, these here that you're seeing are some of our new patented Terry Bear scattering urns. We designed these specifically so it's a better experience for the scattering. They can reseal the lids, and you can select designs for that top metal. But you can keep it at home after you're done, or you can, you know, take it to some different areas to scatter your loved one. Again, you know, 1/3 of all families that are choosing cremation choose scattering. So are you offering this? Are you looking at this in a different way? And then, you know, are you showing families? You know, there's a difference between having something on your website and what you show. You know, we talked about display rooms and maybe some of the standard options you offer for cremation families. But with all this being said, you know, the truth is, you know what to do when a family chooses burial. You're going to take them into the selection room to choose their casket, their products, their vault maybe. Why not do the same for cremation? We really think that there's an opportunity here and a gap that we can cover and make better for these families that are choosing cremation. And again, I mentioned this before, the funeral home from Houston, show them, you know, whether it's Life Art or even another cremation product or a cremation container, often they'll go with not just the basic option. You just have to show them. If they could just see their different options, don't you think maybe they'd understand all of everything in front of them and they might make a different choice? So. And lastly, I want to hone in on positioning yourself as best known. I brought this up a couple of times, but it's really kind of the key message I want you to take from today for sure, is to be best known. So number one is that you certainly need to show up when people search for cremation. Again, to recap, we talked about 500,000 plus people in America search for cremation every single month. You know if you're getting those calls or not. And I'm sure there, you know, were some ideas today that hopefully sparked that you could do more, like that little evaluation that we did a little while ago. You know, add cremation information to your website, announce your new cremation products, sell your products online. Again, get ahead of Amazon. This is an example, you know, you see here of cremation information page on your website. And then we also have an example of our Life Art, you know, products here, a cremation product page. So maybe it's a landing page on your website that overviews something. Just show up when people are searching for cremation. So you have to show up. And then number two is, once you've got it, get it out there and be best known. Again, it's up to you to be best known. Educate your families on social media. You know, people are distracted. We're walking into polls while we stare at our phones nowadays. So distract them with your content. Get the content in front of them. You know, it's going to help you build trust, talk about options, inspire families maybe to do something differently, and you're sending them to your website. You're getting them to come and see what you have to be best known for cremation options. And then lastly, is keep up the community work. Your relationships matter. I mean, you all know this, and they only make everything mentioned before this work that much better. So keep your relationships, stand them up. You know, one thing that we talk about a lot is don't just host an event or don't just do something. Take pictures of it and use it in your marketing. Recycle it. Show other people how you're engaging, you know, with your families and you know, making those relationships deeper in your communities. And you know, if you take anything away from me today, you know, I want you to say that you just don't have the best service to cremation families. You know, my hope for you is to say we are best known for cremation services in our community, and that is where you can grab the huge opportunity that is cremation. And that's all I have. Questions, comments?
Excellent. Here I come. I'm going to pop back on here and field some questions for you from there we are, from the assembled. I don't know if we have any.
Okay.
And let's give them another minute. Do you have your contact? Yes, please make sure your contact information is up there.
I do, yeah. You can scan the QR code here. Again, this can get all of those pieces that I went over with the searches, both with how many are searching in your local market, personalized funerals, eco-friendly funeral options, or just reach out if you have additional questions or ways that we can help. We're happy to help out anybody who wants to make cremation best known. So.
Excellent. And we will have this video up live for you again before this time tomorrow. It should be available for anyone who, you'll get an email. Everyone who's attended today will get an email, and they'll be able to do this in the privacy of their own home if they want. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the information. I got to talk to you a bunch this week, so it was a good week for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us. We're just super excited to talk about something that's near and dear to us, and you know, we hope we can provide a little bit of our insight to help firms with cremation. So
excellent. And as far as things that are coming up, we do have a webinar coming up on June 25th at 2, how to DIY your marketing. And of course, if you're interested in seeing my big red face, it will be back on Friday with the In Case You Missed It podcast and video from Kates-Boylston. But until now, thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your week. And here comes summer. Huh? Good day.